prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built by our courageous choice. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion need to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Virtual Worship with the Unitarian Universalist Church of Silver Spring. I am Richard Lohr, today's worship associate, and my pronouns are he, him, and his. This month, our theme for worship is commitment. Today, our worship is about the Unitarian Universalist principles, how they have changed over time, and the proposed eighth principle. I'm glad you are all here together, taking advantage of the ways which we can connect across distance and difference in community. Whether you are joining us live or watching this service after the live broadcast, I'm very glad you're here. I'd also like to welcome anyone who's joining us for the first or second time. Mary Beth Lerner is our welcoming captain, and she would be glad to answer your questions during the live chat. Mary Beth will also be available during virtual coffee hour after the service. If you're watching live, you can log into the Google to participate in the chat in real time. To help protect privacy, comments will not be available for later playback, but during the service, they are very public, so please keep that in mind. Also, please note that the live chat has certain safety features to prevent disruptive comments, so you won't be able to post special characters or complete web addresses. American Sign Language interpretation is available in a separate Zoom room for those who are deaf or hard of hearing. If you need help finding that link, please ask in the chat or email vstechsupport@uucss.org to get the link. In a few minutes, everyone will be invited to light our flaming chalices. So now is a good time to go to get a chalice, a candle, or even a flashlight so you can join in kindling the flame of community. But first, let's take a moment to say thank you to all those who have made service possible today. Please join me in the words on your screen as we light our chalices and reaffirm our congregational commitment. May this light warm our hearts with love and caring and guide us in the ways of truth. As we gather here for worship, we pledge ourselves to the endless search for truth, to the right of each to believe as mind, heart, and conscience dictate, to accept the responsibilities this freedom commands, and to implement our belief in the essential worth and dignity of every human being. May it be so. Now let's join in singing. The words of the song will appear on your screen.
Since what we choose is what we are, and what we love we yet shall be, the goal may ever shine.
Spirit of life, you know us each by name, yet you are beyond all naming. You are always changing, always becoming, out on the cusp between what is and what could be. Spirit of becoming, in this hour we spend together, singing, laughing, crying, longing. Remind us of how far we've come and how far love and justice are calling us to go. Come, let us worship together.
You've got to do when the Spirit says do. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you've got to do, oh Lord. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 You've got to sing when the Spirit says sing. You've got to sing when the Spirit says sing. When the Spirit says sing, you've got to sing, oh Lord. You've got to sing when the Spirit says sing. 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 You've got to shout when the Spirit says shout. You've got to shout when the Spirit says shout. When the Spirit says shout, you've got to shout, oh Lord. You've got to shout when the Spirit says shout. 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 You've got to do when the Spirit says do. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you've got to do, oh Lord. You've got to do when the Spirit says do. 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 Spirit says do.
Good morning, friends. As you know, I am working as your interim director of religious education. And in this role, I have been working with the Racial Justice Task Force and the Eighth Principle Task Force to determine some of the best ways to incorporate social equity and anti-racism work into all levels of religious education programming here at UUCSS. And I say all of this because as I was reading over the Time for All Ages that Reverend Kristin chose for today, I noticed that there's a lot of common themes in this particular time for all ages that resonate with some of the questions that we're asking right now as we discern whether or not the eighth principle is something that is appropriate for UUCSS as a community to adopt. So I'm hoping that adults and kids alike will listen closely to this very important story. And if you have any questions about what the eighth principle could mean to us, feel free to shoot me an email and I will be happy to talk with you or just email back and forth while you figure out what the eighth principle might mean to you. So, this story is A Time for All Ages, and it was written by Jessica York, and it has been adapted from our Toolbox of Faith curriculum, which is part of the Tapestry of Faith curriculum. Unitarian Universalism is a living faith. We think that people should be free to believe what they must believe, the truth of their life experiences, instead of professing a belief in what we are told to believe. This is what we mean when we say ours is a creedless religion. Being a living faith means that any one of us can change what we believe if we experience a deeper truth that contradicts our previous beliefs. But in order to change, we have to be open to new thoughts, new ideas, and new experiences. We have to be open to the experiences of the people with whom we are in community. In 1948, most congregations and houses of worship in the United States were segregated or separated by the color of their members' skin. Some were segregated by law, and others by custom or by a lack of actively trying to welcome and include all people. The First Unitarian Society of Chicago was one of these congregations. Although their church was located in a neighborhood with many African Americans, only white people could join, according to the written bylaws or rules of the church, and according to the way that the church had always done things before. The day came that many members began to believe they needed to take action against racism. They really wanted to live into their values and their principles. The minister, the Reverend Leslie Pennington, was ready for this day and was ready to take action. So was James Luther Adams. James Luther Adams was a famous liberal theologian and social ethicist, a person who studies religion, beliefs, and values. Reverend Dr. Adams taught at Meadville Lombard Theological School, which was right across the street from the UU Church in Chicago. And he was a member of the congregation's board of directors. He was a leader in their congregation. Along with some others, Reverend Pennington and James Luther Adams proposed a change in the church's bylaws to desegregate the church and welcome people, whatever the color of their skin. They wanted to include, not exclude, and they saw this as a way to put their love into action. When the congregation's board of directors considered the desegregation proposal, most of them supported it. However, one member of the board objected. "Your new program is making desegregation into a creed," this member said. "You are asking everyone in our church to say they believe desegregating or inviting, even recruiting people of color to attend church here is a good way to tackle racism. What if some members don't believe this?" Desegregation was a very controversial topic. In 1948, anything about skin color and racism was controversial. Some people, even some who supported African Americans in demanding their civil liberties, believed in a separate but equal policy, which kept people apart based on their skin color. Respectful debate ensued at the First Unitarian Society of Chicago. Both sides felt in their hearts that their belief was right. Perhaps they were so busy trying to make sure their opinion won the day that they forgot to listen to one another. And so they kept on talking. The debate went on in the board of directors meetings until the early hours of the morning. Everyone was exhausted and frustrated. Finally, James Luther Adams remembered that we should be listening twice as much as talking. He asked the person who had voiced the strongest objection, "What do you say is the purpose of the church?" Suddenly, everyone was listening. Everyone wanted to hear the answer to this crucial question. The board member who opposed opening the church to people of color finally replied, "Okay, Jim, the purpose of this church is to get hold of people like me and change them." The First Unitarian Society of Chicago successfully desegregated. With each new person who becomes a Unitarian Universalist, this faith of ours changes. And as it changes, it can shape all of us. May we all be open to being changed, shaped, reformed, and always into our better selves.
In this congregation, we take time each week to share the most important pieces of our lives with one another. Each and every Sunday, we have the opportunity to learn of the greatest joys and sorrows in other people's lives and to share our own. And we do this because bearing witness to one another's lives is a sacred act. If you're worshiping with us live, I invite you to type your joys or sorrows into the chat box during the music. Everything shared in the chat box is public during the live broadcast, so please keep that in mind as you decide what to share. If you need additional support, please send an email to layministers@uucss.org, and either they or I will be in touch. But you don't have to be a lay minister to reach out to someone whose joy or sorrow touches your heart today. So please, make a note of those people you'd like to call or send a card or an email this week. And if you're watching this as a recording later, I invite you to take this time to hold your own joys and sorrows in your heart and to lift up in prayer and loving regard all those who are in need. Let us now open our hearts to the joys and sorrows this gathered community has to share. Spirit of life, oneness in all and in whom all are one. On this beautiful morning, we give thanks for all of the ways the glory of life lifts our hearts, rouses our minds, awakens our spirits, and moves in, with, and among us. For earlier sunrises and later sunsets, for tiny red buds on tree branches and green shoots popping through cold earth, and for all that testifies to the beginning of the end of winter, we give thanks. When struggle and pain and the reality of the world's suffering weigh heavily on our hearts, let us give thanks for the faith tradition we share, which reminds us again and again that love is stronger than hate. When we grow disappointed in ourselves, in the ways maybe we haven't been our best selves, let us remember that none of us is ever defined by our worst mistakes, and that grace is available to all. Help us to make this church evermore a place of faith and hope and liberating love, so that we will become the people whose lives bear witness to grace and love and mercy, and whose work will help bend the arc of the universe towards justice. These and all things we pray for love's sake. Amen.
Blessed Spirit of my life, give me strength through stress and strife. Help me live with dignity. Let me know serenity. Fill me with a vision. Clear my mind of fear and confusion. When my thoughts flow restlessly, let peace find a home in me. Spirit of great mystery, hear the still small voice in me. Help me live my wordless creed as I comfort those in need. Fill me with compassion, be the source of my intuition. Then when life is done for me, let love be my legacy.
Our reading today was written by the Reverend Meg Barnhouse. It's excerpts from an article she wrote for the UU World magazine in 2009. I've gone to a lot of church services in my time. When I was 8, wearing Mary Jane shoes and white stockings in a blue coat with a velveteen collar my mother had made, sitting next to my little sister in her coat, identical to mine. Trying not to wiggle in the pew, I would make check marks as the sections of the order of service finished. Hymn number 1, pastoral prayer, scripture reading, sermon. I loved checking off the sermon. We colored in our bulletins and we looked through the hymnals and made ourselves giggle by adding "between the sheets" to their titles. A Baptist friend says she and her friends added "in the bathtub." "Turn back, oh man, between the sheets." We three kings of Orient are in the bathtub. Years ago, I came into this Unitarian Universalist community of faith. I'm home. I listen to people talk sometimes about liberal religion as if it's thin gruel, watered down to please everyone. Our 7 principles, they complain, are either too much like a creed or so general as to be meaningless. My experience of the principles is that they are deeply demanding. The first one asks me to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, which means I can no longer subscribe to the cheerful Calvinist doctrine of the total depravity of human nature. Now I have to struggle with the worth and dignity of people who do unspeakably awful things, whereas the doctrine of total depravity made that one a no-brainer. I'm supposed to value the democratic process, hearing the voice of everyone equally, allowing everyone to have a say. The UU principles are demanding enough to make me whine. For those who say they're thin gruel, I have a suggestion. Let's stick something onto the end of every principle that will stop people from smiling and nodding comfortably as they are read. Instead of adding in the bathtub or between the sheets, how about attaching beginning in our homes and congregations? Then we'd be faced with affirming things like the goal of peace, liberty, and justice for all, beginning in our homes and congregations. Everyone who has raised children knows that peace is often at odds with liberty and that justice demands a disturbance of the peace. To put those 3 together in one principle is outrageous and lovely. It's easier to think about working towards them in a global context than in the context of Cheerios and pajamas, car keys, and cleaning up one's bedroom. For me, this faith isn't a thin gruel. It's not even a rich and hearty gruel. It's walnuts and bananas, pancakes, mangoes, arugula, ginger, and avocado. The feast is prepared with effort, enjoyment, persistence, and commitment. Care to join me? When I first went to seminary, one of the things I looked forward to most was learning about the Nicene Creed. Having been raised in a Unitarian Universalist church since I was 8, I'd grown up hearing about how terrible creeds were and what a good thing it was that our faith didn't have one. So as everyone else in the class groaned and rolled their eyes, I was delighted when my professor at Wesley Theological Seminary said we'd be going line by line through the creed in his systematic theology class. Finally, I'd get to learn what the big deal was, why so many people hated this creed so much. Finally, I'd get to taste the forbidden fruit. I learned a lot more about that creed in that class than I ever bargained for, but the most important thing I took away wasn't actually about the creed at all. What I took away was a deeper understanding of the different ways my classmates and I understood the nature of truth. For most of the people I went to seminary with, truth is something that's already been revealed in Scripture, in a person, in sacraments. While the Bible may be retranslated, the creed re-articulated for more modern audiences, they themselves remain essentially exactly the same. They can be understood in new ways, and the truth within them can be applied to new situations to achieve a deeper understanding of their inherent truth. But according to Orthodox Christianity, truth and God don't change. They are cornerstones. They're solid. They are the only constants that can be depended on in a changing and chaotic world. Now, our Unitarian Universalist tradition defines the nature of truth differently. Our faith has long recognized the wisdom and truths available in sacred writings, in different traditions and customs, in the lives of prophets and sages. We encourage people to seek truth wherever they might find it. But in our tradition, God learns and evolves. Truth is not static, and revelation is not sealed. We are free to seek after not only deeper truth, but entirely new truths. We can embrace the truth that even our most dependable constants, the sunrise and the sunset, the phases of the moon and the turning of the tides, that these things are actually, in fact, finite. They will come to an end when our solar system dies. And we can embrace the truth that the building blocks of this solar system may eventually be remade into a new one with new planets, new sunrises and sunsets, new tides and moon phases, and new creatures to appreciate them. For a tradition that understands truth as something that can evolve and change, it should come as no surprise that the things we say we believe in, our principles, have evolved and changed over the years too. Back in the 1800s, the Unitarians would periodically release statements of the things most commonly believed among us. These statements would be written up by a respected minister and voted on at Unitarian conferences. By 1961, the Unitarians and Universalists officially joined forces, and after a lot of arguing and wordsmithing, they adopted 6 principles. About 20 years after those first 6 principles were adopted, the UU Women's Federation began to push for changes to the original 6 UU principles. Many Federation members were leaders in the feminist movement and were eager for the principles of their faith to reflect the full humanity of women. So at a General Assembly, the UU's annual business meeting, they proposed new gender-inclusive principles. But the UU Christian Fellowship opposed that first proposal because all mention of the holy and the sacred had been removed too. So a committee was formed to take a year to rework things. And as they worked, they wound up making far more changes than they initially did, adding a 7th principle and even adding the 6 sources of our faith. Thanks to their hard work, the adapted principles were adopted almost unanimously in 1985. Since then, the UUA has used these principles to guide its work, and whenever people write new religious education curricula or propose new projects for the association to undertake, they are expected to explain how those things are in keeping with the UUA's mission and which principles they reflect. Unlike a creed which does not change, our UU principles are written and rewritten through the generations, because ours is a tradition that embraces not only deeper truth, but new truth. Ours is a faith that grows and changes and evolves and that encourages all of us to do the same. And all of this is important to keep in mind because, as many of you know, Unitarian Universalists all over the country are advocating for the formal adoption of an 8th principle. It all began with Paula Cole-Jones, former UUA field staff and anti-racism, multiculturalism consultant. As it says on the 8th Principle website, after working with congregations on these issues for over 15 years, she realized that a person can believe they are being a good UU and following the 7 principles without thinking about or dealing with racism and other oppressions at the systemic level. She realized that an 8th principle was needed to correct this. The Church of the Restoration in Philadelphia was the first to adopt the 8th principle, and they were soon followed by several more. Since then, a committee to study the proposed 8th principle was formed so that eventually delegates from every congregation in the United States can vote to adopt the 8th principle for our entire association. In June, this congregation will have a chance to vote to adopt the 8th principle for ourselves. And in the meantime, other congregations like ours are deciding whether or not to adopt it for them, to set an example and tell the whole association that the work of dismantling racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions is absolutely core to our faith. Congregations like ours are choosing to adopt this principle to claim unequivocally that the work of building multicultural, beloved community is foundational to who we are as Unitarian Universalists. That it is as important to our faith as our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person. That though it takes a lot of work to change our principles, the way this edition will shape the way future Unitarian Universalists understand their faith is worth it. We change this faith, and this faith changes us. May it be so, and may we make it so. Amen.
Good morning. I am Jane Jackson, and I use she, her pronouns. I and my husband, John Acton, have been members of this church for 35 years. We raised our children in this community, and now we are growing old here. I am grateful for this opportunity to share why the proposed 8th principle is important to me. Several years ago, I was standing by a river bank in Maine, reading the historical marker outside of an old industrial building. It said it was a cotton mill, built in 1820. That mill provided some probably meager living for the people of the company town that housed its workers, and much wealth for its owners. I knew where the cotton had to have come from. In that moment, some veil of ignorance and self-protection temporarily blew aside, and I actually, for once, got it in my body that this country was made out of the unpaid labor and the suffering of enslaved Black people, that my northern white working class ancestors were part of it, and that even if I had just arrived here last week, I would still be benefiting from it. Ever since then, I have known that it is my moral responsibility as a white person in the United States of America to participate in taking down the structures that support racism and my own privileged position, and to somehow help repair the centuries worth of harm that have been done. But by myself, I haven't always known what to do besides read books, give money, and curse at the evening news. I feel that when we as a church, as this entity that is all at once a gathering of individuals, a community of the heart, and an institution in our society, when we affirm that the dismantling of racism in ourselves and in our institutions is one of our core principles, then we all have a way better chance of responding wisely, effectively, bravely, and persistently to this evil. We create the chance that the children of our children will actually know what we, their ancestors, meant when we spoke of a diverse, multicultural, beloved community. I love it that this proposed 8th principle speaks in terms of actions. In Buddhism, there's a practice called the 5 daily recollections. With the first 4, we remember that we are inescapably subject to aging, sickness, death, and the loss of everything that we treasure. that our time is short. The fifth recollection is about karma, the law of cause and effect. It says that we are not only responsible for our actions, but that the only things we actually own in this life are our actions. It's what we do that will last long after we are gone. I would like to share in closing some of the words of benediction that my teacher Ruth King wrote at the end of her book, Mindful of Race. May we understand and transform racial habits of harm. May our thoughts and actions reflect the world we want to live in and leave behind. May we heal the seeds of separation inherited from our ancestors in gratitude for this life. Thank you.
I now invite each and every person tuning into this service, whether live or at a later time, to make a financial offering to the congregation. Your offering today will help fuel the flame of this community and make our ministries and programs possible. But most importantly, making an offering will allow you to practice generosity, to contribute to a community that can do more good together than any of us can do alone. There are 3 ways you can make your financial gift to the congregation. The first is by downloading the Give Plus mobile app from Vanco to set up an account. The second way is to give by using your phone to text a message to 833-880-1363. And if the app or texting just doesn't work for you, the third way to give is by making a check directly to the church. All the information you need for all 3 of these methods is on your screen now and will appear again towards the end of today's service. Every program, our different ministries, and all of the support and music and fellowship of this congregation is possible, not because we charge people to participate, not because we attach a fee to all that we do. It's all possible through our shared generosity. And I hope you join me in making an offering in thanks for all that the UUCSS means to you. The offering will now be given and received with gratitude.
I was born by the river in a little tent, just like the river I've been running ever since. It's been a long, long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh yes it will. It's been too hard to live in, but I'm afraid to die, 'cause I don't know what's up there beyond the sky. Oh, it's been a long, long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Oh, I go to the movie and I go downtown. Somebody keep telling me don't hang around. Oh, it's been a long, long time coming, but I know change is gonna come. Oh, yes it will. Then I go to my brother, and I say, brother, help me please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. There's been times that I thought, oh, I wouldn't last long. Now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes it is. Then I go to my brother and I say, oh, brother, please. But he winds up knocking me back down on my knees. Oh, there've been times that I thought, oh, I couldn't last long, but now I think I'm able to carry on. It's been a long time coming, but I know change gonna come. Oh, yes it will.
May the gifts we have given fuel the flame of our commitment, empower us to serve out our mission, and give the life we share the shape of truth, love, and justice.
Hi, my name is Eric Lever, and I'm the chairperson for the Capital Improvements Committee. And I'm so excited to announce that we have a date, March 22nd, to start the improvements on the sanctuary building. We're so excited to begin this long-awaited work to improve and beautify our campus. A lot of the work is going to be out of sight, both because it's up on the roof and also because campus is going to be closed. So if you want to get a sense of the work that we're actually going to be doing, we have a phase 1 construction view book, which is really helpful. We also have a full construction schedule if you want to be, staying really close to the updates on what's happening with the campus. And while we expect campus to remain closed during the COVID restrictions, we are planning on taking as many pictures and video as we can to keep everybody updated on the progress of the work. As we move forward, we're going to also start our planning for the phase 2 work, and phase 2 is focusing on improvements to the community building. And while we also have a schedule for this work, those dates are probably going to be a little bit more fluid as we start to work with the architecture firm to define the work that needs to be done and also how we're going to prioritize that work. We also have an outline for the many needs in the community hall, which can be found in our phase 2 community building assessment, which is also available through Dropbox. As the board is going to be setting the final budget for the phase 2 work this spring, we're putting out a final call to fulfill outstanding capital campaign pledges. We currently have roughly $200,000 in outstanding pledges from current members, and knowing the status of those pledges is going to be able to maximize the impact of the work to make the community building a more functional and welcoming space for our congregation and friends. If you have questions about any of the work that's going to be done or how we're going about making the prioritizations for the work in the community hall, you can join us today after services in a special breakout room, and myself and members of the committee will be glad to answer them. We're so excited to start this work, and we're so excited to have the support of the congregation as we move forward to make our campus a welcoming and beautiful place that we're all going to get to come back to, hopefully before too long.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the dark night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. You are like no other being. What you can give, no other can give to the future of our precious children, to the future of the world where we live. Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the dark night.
Please join me in the words of the chalice extinguishing. Carry the flame of peace and love until we meet again.
Spirit of life, you are always changing, always becoming, out on the cusp between what is and what could be. Spirit of becoming, as we turn from this time together back to the fullness of our lives, remind us of how far we've come and how far love and justice are calling us to go. Our worship now has ended and our service begins.